the recurrent expenditure is unsustainable. And we are spending about $7 billion a year on the subsidy payments. The debt service has moved from 25% last year to over 30%, which is now unacceptable by any standards. So there's no headroom to borrow. So as you mentioned earlier, we have a deficit. The effective deficit this year is 2 trillion. That is the deficit for this year from the last supplementary budget. And we're projecting another 2.2 trillion deficit next year. So if we have to borrow on that, which is what we're going to do, either we're going to use quantitative easing or borrowing. So we can always do the budget. What this budget has done really is just to kick the can along the road. Okay, which might be fair enough. You kick the can along the road, you give yourself time now. So the question is, what are the policies that you're going to put in place to back up this budget that can reflate the economy? That is what I want to see. That is the articulation that I want to see from the government. So you can spend the 6 billion, it's not a problem. We can find ways for you to finance the 2 trillion deficit. So that's not an issue. So the question is, how are you going to reflate this economy? How are you going to restore confidence back into the economy? Because
how to come with the policies.
Yes, because the policies, the stock market the investors have lost confidence, the foreign direct investment has gone down, and we don't have enough money. So we need to clearly articulate those policies around the budget, and that is what I would like to see within this government, an economic team. I'm not talking about the president's press secretary. I'm not talking about the president's special assistant on media. I'm not talking about the minister of information. I'm talking about a group of people within the presidency that can sit down and articulate policies and talk to the market, and the market will respect and respond that this is our policy direction and this is what we're going to do. That is my own concern about the budget. We can always do budgets. It's not an issue. And we can always fund budgets. But the question is, how do we reflect the economy? Because if we don't have that, we have an unemployment crisis looming.
Okay. Your things you've talked, your submission right now raises certain concerns, plenty of concerns, especially for, I wanted to say, for the layman out there who's wondering, looks as if things are really going to go way down south. But is it so bad where we are now? I'll just point this out. In the 2016 budget already, there's a proposal to borrow about 1.8 trillion. That's what we're going. You were saying something about we need to borrow to take care of our power sector. You mentioned that.
If you're borrowing, you borrow smart, right?
Okay.
You borrow to invest. And that investment should yield certain things. If you fix power, for example, the multiplier effect would be so huge.
Okay.
Government might end up collecting more tax revenues. People might earn more. Just the fact that there are certain enablers that have been put in place. So economically speaking, right, certain investments should be done now with a certain sense of urgency.
Now, if the government does that, let's say this amount that's to be borrowed, 1.835.88 trillion, let's say that's borrowed and put into power, would it in any way help to revive this receding economy?
Well, yes, I think the impact is that a lot of the mostly accepted is that you want to spend your way out of a recession.
Exactly.
So the question is that the argument, you don't borrow to pay salaries. You don't borrow to fund your recurrent expenditure because you are going to just create an expansion of money supply in that area. But if you borrow to fund investments, what you are saying is that you have a longer term investments. But then we have to ask ourselves, what is the borrowing limit of the government right now, which is the issue. So government does not have much headroom to borrow. Right now, we have a 2 trillion deficit we financed this year. So that has taken the debt profile from 12 trillion, that's about $60 billion, to 14 trillion, that's about 70. So by the time you add this 1.8, our debt profile would have gone to 80 billion or 16 trillion, $80 billion or 16 trillion. So within a year, this government is going to expand the debt profile by about 30% to about 80, from 60 billion to $80 billion. That is the trend we're going on right now.
If we will expand from 30 billion to about 80,
Yes.
what about the debt servicing? That means that would
That's what
increase
I'm
as well.
saying. So the debt servicing is going to
Would
go
go
up.
up.
So that's the challenge now on this budget, because right now the subsidy is maybe 5 billion. Debt service is over 1 trillion already. Out of the 6 trillion you're talking about, you're using over 1 trillion for debt service. So by the time you put all these things, how much do you have left for the capital expenditure? And don't forget, these monies, they don't come in. Now you also mentioned clearly you made a very, I mean, your introduction was very good, because you've said those are the key headline numbers. Oil benchmark prices are down on the futures because there's a glut. So you're saying that you project 38, now you're seeing 37, 35. So clearly we're not going to meet those revenue targets next year. So what the government needs to do is that we need to go through a reality check, because we've reached our headroom when it comes to borrowing. It's clear.
So how do we, you've said that funding the budget is not a problem.
Yes.
But we are still talking about oil prices that have remained consistently inconsistent. So how do we fund this? We have issues
you are
with
going to borrow.
our non-oil
You are going to borrow,
revenue.
and you are going to reach your borrowing limit. That's number one. There's a limit to which you can borrow. So you get to your borrowing limit. And I think as my colleague has said on the show, you borrow smartly and you take your boat, get to your borrowing limits, whatever it is, and make sure what you're borrowing, you're not borrowing money to pay salaries, but you're borrowing money to make serious investments that will pay off down the line. So you take that out of the way. We now need to address the issues of the counter-cyclical issues with oil. We shouldn't be talking about oil at $35 a barrel. Oil was $100. When oil is $100 a barrel, nobody says anything in Nigeria. When it goes to $35, they will say we are broke, we are bankrupt. No, I don't agree. Oil is only 14% of our GDP. It's only 14%, but unfortunately, it provides 90% of our revenues. We've been talking about diversifying this economy, but it's only lip service. So this is the time for us to look inwards and begin to realize the potential of our economy. I don't agree. People say Nigerian economy, whether you like it or not, our GDP is heading to 600 billion. It's still the largest in Africa. How are we managing this economy? How are we driving this economy? So the challenge that faces this government and the managers of this economy, including our Congress, is forget about oil at $35 a barrel. Saudi Arabia doesn't think about it anymore. They have close to 800 billion in reserves that can see them through any oil price for the next 15 years.
And our reserves have been dropping.
Our excess crude amount is $2 billion from a high of $20 billion. So we have to start talking about key issues. All these state governors, how are they managing their states? We have to ask questions. They need to restructure those states. They're not viable. The cost structure is too high. They need to lay off. Even the federal government has to downsize.
Because I was going there, that if you say we need to take care of recurrent expenditure and reduce it